if I was doing the barbell squat rack, I might do like a couple with no weights, but no warm-ups.
Okay, that's fair. It's good. We'll all admit that we've skipped our workout, our warm up at some point, but at least for you, if I skip it, it's completely my fault. For you guys, at least, it might not have been knowledge about how to do it exactly. So I have sinned, you have not. So don't worry. Hopefully after I go through this, it'll be really succinct in understanding like why not only is it to your benefit to prevent injury, but it's actually going to make your workout better. As I go through this, please let me know, like, if you don't want me to ask you questions as we go through, or if you do have questions, like, please interrupt me and ask, because as Jeremiah knows, like, I will just ramble, and nobody needs that in their life. So reframing the warm-up is important too for a lot of people. They're just like, well, especially if they're younger, they're just like, and haven't had any orthopedic injuries. They're like, well, what's the point? Like, I just get in there, warm up, and eventually I feel good. But just like how we reframe sort of our understanding of nutrition as fueling us as opposed to restricting ourselves, the warm up and the inverse is a way to think of potentiating or actually creating a better performance benefit during the workout, as opposed to just preventing injury. So there's a few reasons that we need one. One, I've heard one time from a high school football coach, which generally they're like the biggest meatheads of all time. They were saying that you don't need a stretch because a cheetah never stretches. And the counter argument to that is basically a cheetah never sat in a chair for 10 hours a day staring at a computer screen. So when we exercise, we're trying to replicate shapes that are anatomically correct and advantageous, meaning if our shoulder was intended to go all the way over our head, we should be able to get it all the way over there. That doesn't take into account the fact we've probably been sitting slouched over a computer all day and our shoulder may no longer be in that position. So the warm up is an opportunity to put our body back into an anatomically correct position so we are optimized and we won't injure ourselves. That goes for long-term mobility restrictions too. So common one is tight hips, meaning immobile hip extension from sitting in a chair. So if you're going to squat, you need your hips to function properly. So we want to make sure those are warmed up. The other thing that I've kind of been harping on too is if you just got out of your chair right now and tried to run your fastest mile, you would not run as fast had you not warmed up, right? So basically being able to warm up and all the things that I'm going to explain physiologically that happen are going to make you perform better physically. And then, of course, of most concern to people like me that have been lifting weights and playing contact sports for far too long is the reduction of injury risk as well as post-exercise soreness from warming up. So these are the main reasons. And the simple way to think about it is that muscle tissue is meant to be elastic and pliable. And when it's cold, you'll notice that it becomes stiff. So I don't know if you've ever had an injury in the past, but when it gets cold, you feel it hurts a little bit more. That's actually the constriction that's going on. But once you get blood flowing and there's a little bit of expansion within joints and on the muscles become more pliable. Therefore, the stretch reflex is better. So there's less injury risk and they work more efficiently. So more power or strength output. And also, like, you're just going to not have sort of those creaks and aches and pains. So is any of this kind of new information for you guys?
I mean, probably seeing how many boxes it checks. I think some people think like, or I probably thought like, oh, get the blood running, try to warm things up, reduce the risk of injury. But seeing like the full spread, it's like, that is really cool. It hits a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. What about for you, Jeanette? Is this new or just kind of recycled information?
I think some of it, like more the mobility, it's something you don't think about when you're younger. Like you're like, oh, yeah, I'm trying to like prevent my injury warm up kind of thing, but like actually focusing on like your ability to get deeper in a squat, or as you get older, just to keep that functionality of being more mobile. So I'd say that's more new.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. And that functionality piece that you mentioned is important because joints are very much like an example. If you don't use it, you lose it with range of motion. So, if you're not moving your joints through a full range of motion, then you're probably going to have an issue with the actual ability to replicate that position in the workout, especially if now you're adding load like force to it. It could be an injury risk there as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. So these are sort of the reasons for warming up. But when we want to break the warm up down into a few parts, I like to think of it this way. And there's a guy named Dr. John Russin, who's a physical therapist and a powerlifting coach. And I took a lot of this from him. So I don't want to give myself the credit for it completely, although his warm-up is like 35 minutes long and nobody has time for that. So I made it into a little bit more succinct, consumable 10 to 15 minute series that, you know, the average person like ourselves can use, or I use this with my clients in person. So the first piece is going to be what we're most used to. So Jeremiah, like you were talking about, getting on the treadmill or something like that, an aerobic activation. So that's just literally blood flow and physical heat creation in the body, as well as oxygen uptake. Then we're going to go into dynamic stretching, which is just mostly cross body movements or rotational movements, since we don't do most of that in our daily life. That's unloaded, so just body weight. Then activating the muscles we're going to use specific to the workout. Any rehab exercise, so if it's a existing injury you have that you're trying to rehab, doing that prior to getting into the more intense parts of the warm-up, which would be movement pattern replication. So basically doing something similar to what you're going to do in the workout. Potentiation, which is getting the muscles excited or sprinting the muscles to get them ready for the workout. And then finally, just very bro speak, feeler sets, or Jeanette, like you said, kind of throwing the bar on and actually doing some unloaded or more lightly loaded sets of the workout that you're going into. So I broke this down as if in an example. Oh, sorry, before I'm jumping ahead. Do you guys have any questions about that before I go into more detail?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Just stop me if you do, because I'll just keep talking. Like I said, I apologize, but these are the sections, and I'll teach you kind of how to build your own warm up based on your workout. But the easiest way to think of it is you want to get the blood flowing. You want to move your body generally. You want to activate the muscles you're going to use in your workout. You want to do your rehab if that's necessary. You want to do the patterns that you're going to do in the workout. You want to do them quickly, and then you want to get into the workout. And that's the transition. So that's the sequence that you go through. So for example, let's look at an upper body workout. So Jeanette, what's an upper body work exercise that you like to do, like a strength exercise?
That cable pullback.
Oh, the row?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. So say that you were going to be doing a workout with that exercise in it, right? So we know that that exercise is going to be using the shoulder complex right here. So we're going to have to activate that. So in this example, get the blood flowing. It could be rowing, running, walking, bike, whatever it is, just to get the blood flowing for 2 minutes. Then our dynamic warm-up, or moving the joints that we're going to use. So we have to think in terms of what's actually going to happen. We know that our thoracic spine, our cervical spine, and then also our shoulder complex are going to be involved in that exercise. So we're going to do shoulder circles or cars, and arch reach, which is twisting the upper back, and then thoracic spine extensions, which are great for people that are sitting at computers most of the day and going through those. So that'll be our dynamic stretching piece. And then we're going to get into the exercise or the activations for the muscles that we're going to use in that exercise. So do either of you know, on a cable row, name some of the muscles that you might be using for that?
Rhombus, all the back muscles.
Rhomboids?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, geometry?
right.
Yeah, rhomboids would definitely be one of them in the upper back, right? So in this example, actually, this prone TWI is an example of one of the exercises you would use to activate those muscles. So I picked muscles that activate the complex of the shoulder and the upper back, just like you pointed out, Jeremiah. And the idea is essentially that there's these things called mechanoreceptors in the muscle, and they're like little batteries or dimmer switches that we want to charge up. So if we start by doing light versions of exercises, we're actually powering them up to handle larger loads, right? Because our nervous system is sending signals to those muscles that it's time to do work. If we go from 0 to 100, there's a risk they might not all fire, we have an injury. But if we go like 20%, 30%, 40% and amp up, not only is the injury risk reduced, but now the muscle is fully activated, so we'll be able to produce as much force as possible. So we're activating those. Fourth part, I have some shoulder injuries from an old surgery, so I throw this in. There's something called the body blade, which is a vibratory shoulder stabilization implement, and I've just used that to kind of get the internal muscles of the shoulder activated as well. So not dissimilar from the individual muscle activations. And then finally, since we're doing upper body, I wrote this. Apologies, Jeanette, I stole your exercise, but this would be for if someone was going to do bench press. So they would be doing a horizontal pushing exercise. So it would be some push-ups. And in this, I wrote it as a tempo. So you're just moving a little slower to build strength in there as well. And then the next step would be to potentiate the muscle or create some explosion. So this is thinking about something plyometric. So like jumping, bouncing, or throwing. So in this case, we're doing a horizontal chest pass against the wall with the ball and replicating sort of that same movement pattern and throwing it. And then finally, since we are bench pressing in this example, you would do warm up sets building up to the weights that you would be using for the workout. That's a lot. I know that's a ton. Looking at this, knowing how long your workouts take, how long do you think you would take you to get through all this?
Right? I don't know. That's at least like, wouldn't that be like 10 minutes? Well, I mean, 2 minutes of rowing right off the top.
For me, it takes longer because a lot of times I have to look up what it is and then like make sure I'm doing it right. Like, so I noticed that adds time on my warm-ups and workouts.
Sure, absolutely. Like watching the
yeah.
videos to understand how to do the exercise.
And there's some like minute, and item 6 has minute rests. Oh, minute rest between item 6 and 7. Yeah.
No, between the two sets of item 6. So you do 2 sets of 5. With explosive things, you want a lot of rest. Like the rest to work ratio should be pretty extreme.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think like to be fair, this example would probably take about 15 minutes. And you know, one of the things that's good about sort of creating a routine, and to your point, Jeanette, it's like when you don't know what any of these things are, like half the time consumed in the warm-up process is going to be watching the videos. I think generally like numbers 1 through 5, you should over time just know like, hey, am I doing upper body today? That they're set basically for all intents and purposes, especially anything that's like rehab oriented towards you, or any like what we called correctives. Like if you like had a shoulder that was bugging you and you're just kind of working on rehabbing it, those things will remain consistent. And then the 6 and 7 will kind of be over time, you'll see enough exposure to them that you would be like, okay, I know if I'm doing this exercise, I can replicate with this pattern. But point definitely well taken. I always go back and forth. I think some people like variety in their warm-ups, but to me, I'm like, if I can just kind of plug and play a general warm-up for that type of workout, then it's going to save me some time and just be a little bit more efficient as well. So here's a question. Should you be tired at the end of your warm-up?
No.
No, it should be invigorated.
Yes. Yes. So if 10 is all out, at what percentage should you come out of the warm-up?
5.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to save your big power for, you know, your last rep in a big compound lift or whatever you're working on.
Sure. I think 5 would be a little bit low, just to be honest. I think you would want to peak at like a 7 or 8, but then come out of it more like a maybe 5 or 6, Jeanette, like that. So like you want to touch sort of that sprint level and then come back down as you go into that final working set. So yes, on the exit, but at least in the warm-up, going like during the warm-up, making sure that you're hitting sort of that sprint level as well, because there's some interesting things aerobically and anaerobically that can happen if you don't actually peak at the same level that you're going to replicate in the workout. So there's like in when I was in college and wrestling, the term that they use would like before in your morning warm-up, you would want to blow out your lungs, which means do sprints at the same level that you're going to replicate in pattern. And the difference would be if you didn't warm up properly like that, you would notice people that they got behind on their warm-up and they wouldn't actually warm up until halfway, until like their match was already over. So they lost all that time had they not spent the time. So it's counterintuitive. You're like, I want to save my energy, but in reality, it'll actually help you perform better when you get into it. Do you have any questions about sort of this format or anything like that?
No, it's interesting. I'd be excited to try it out one day, because I feel like my warm-ups now are more mobility, flexibility. I break a sweat, but it's overall more mellow. There's usually nothing explosive in my warm-ups. So this is like CrossFit warm-up, which are crazy.
Well, and I think too, like it's easy to just throw something, right? Like, so think about like, say you were going to do squats, Jeremiah, like what's an explosive squat pattern movement that you could do to add into your warm-up?
Oh, there's those like ball wall squats. I mean, there isn't even a ball at my gym. I'm just saying, like I've done those in CrossFit. So it's like exploding up squat where you throw the ball at the wall.
Oh, like a wall ball.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, even just remove the wall ball, right? Like what about a jump squat or something like that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, like a jump squat, like top of a burpee, just
Yeah. So just
yeah.
creating a plyometric version of whatever you're going to do for your first like working sets, things like that in there as well. So a couple of final thoughts like about this, like I had a coach that I used to work with who's really into longevity training and making sure that, at least in mindset, like making sure that your workouts are set up in a way that you can do them forever. So he would always say that, and especially like I saw him do with his clients, like no one knows when the warm up ends and the workout begins. So that was his ethos, that it was like the warm up is just going to seamlessly flow into the workout. So it's not like, oh, I do a couple like banded pass throughs and then like 2 jumping jacks and now I go squat 500 pounds. It was going to be like you went so smoothly from one thing into another that the warm up really was seen as part of the workout and doing things in that way. And that's what I would always convey. It's like, you know, the warm up should transition right into the workout, doing those feeler sets and things like that. And then just kind of a final thought, if you're crunched for time, which I know you guys generally are because of work and other responsibilities going on, I would say that it makes more sense to me in my observation working with clients for a long time and keeping an eye on health and injury, staying injury free is most important. It's better to spend the time warming up and cut the time from your workout than to skip the warm up and go directly into the workout. Right? Like that's a short-sighted mentality to be like, I have to get this hour of work in versus saying like, if I hurt myself today, I'll miss 2 weeks of workouts. So you'll never regret taking the time to warm up properly, but you'll absolutely regret being injured as well. So that's something I think I've noticed with clients is they're like, well, I only have 45 minutes. It's an hour workout, including the warm up. I'm going to cut the warm up. It's better to have a half-hour workout plus the 15-minute warm up in that scenario, in my opinion, and in my experience working with people like that. So after I just talked your ears off forever, what questions, comments, thoughts, you know, that do you have after seeing this?
I mean, I have it easy now because you are planning my warm-ups. It'd be hard. It'd be intimidating, like from scratch. But an interesting, you know, probably be something to learn a lot of if I had to sit down and come up with my own warm-ups. But I guess I would learn to sort of match the movements with what I was working on that day, especially my old split, which was very body part specific. Like I'm doing shoulders today. So I guess if I would have been wise enough to do a warm up back then, it would have focused on shoulder range of motion.
Sure. Jeanette, what about you?
I was going to say, I think just some general thoughts are, to your point, once you know the warm-ups, I'm on your level where I'd like to just like stick with the same ones because it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing, can just flow into it. So I think like with our program being 4 weeks, it's like after that first week of like learning things, the second, third, and fourth weeks are much quicker, and like I feel really confident about going into them. So I think to the extent I keep learning these warm-ups and then find the ones that I really like for different workouts that I'll be doing, it's gonna be really helpful. And then I had a question. So like on days where there's something like long conditioning, so like kind of like the running, and then there's 3 dynamic movements that are, you know, for timed, I will warm up just kind of like walking on the treadmill. Should I be doing like other kinds of warm-ups for those days?
Yeah, I think it's not a bad idea. I think ultimately this is the way that you want to think about it. What are you going to ask your body to do in the workout? Like what movement patterns and physical demands are you going to place on it? Like if you're just running the whole time, you're probably not going to place a tremendous demand on your upper body. So there's not a lot of ask there. So you don't need to spend a lot of time warming that up. But if you're going to do things like, you know, thrusters or burpees or like carrying something heavy, like you're doing a full body workout. So you want to make sure that you're at least moving your body through a full range of motion, especially, and I can't stress this enough, just because it's a lot of what I'm seeing with clients is a lack of rotational ability, because everything we do is in front of us or directly to the side. So we stay in those sagittal and frontal planes. We never get into what they call the transverse plane or the rotational plane. And that's actually, as humans, that's where all our power is from. That's how we run. That's how we throw things. So I would say for something like that, like if you want to warm up on the treadmill and then just go through some dynamic stretching, like, you know, world's greatest stretch is one that I throw in, like archer windmills, like things like that, as well as just doing like a few like banded exercises for the hips and the shoulders. Like that would probably be sufficient. It doesn't have to be long, but you don't want like the first time you load the shoulder to be in the middle of the workout when you're doing a heavy thruster and you're tired.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So
Yeah. And not your fault in any way. Like I think there's definitely like a lack of information out there about the reasons for this. There's also in misunderstanding that the volume of work is more important than it is. So people think like because our fitness culture is generally oriented around I work out to burn calories, the assumption is that I have to do X amount of work to burn X amount of calories. The reality is that like the quality of the work you're doing is more important than the quantity of the work. So if you take the time, reduce the total volume of work and do better work, it's actually going to be more beneficial to your health and performance long term rather. Yeah. So I think that's just kind of, it's just a misunderstanding, not on your part, but just generally in the fitness community, and one that I had at a certain point too, about like, well, you know, the warm-up's cool and all, but I only have 90 minutes. So I want to do my 8,000 burpees. So I'm going to start now kind of thing like that. But so to long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, I think adding some additional warm-up to that would be beneficial as well. And like to quote Ethan again, the transition from the warm up to the workout guy, like you can never warm up enough. Like if it was up to him, you would have warmed up for the entire session and then just left. But you know, there really isn't enough, especially like, you know, I know we're all 21 here, but you know, like once we get older than 21, it'll be challenging to our bodies if we don't warm up as well. So that's one of the big things that I see with people. And also